From a Soviet past to a transatlantic future, Hungary is a country that is undergoing a military transformation. Part of that change is modernizing its military and evaluating national security threats, both new and old. We sit down with Hungary's defense minister to talk about his decision-making process in that transformation. I'm Yusuf Aram, and you're watching One on One. What are Hungary's national security concerns, and what are your priorities as defense minister?
We are building credible deterrence. That's the most important. We are not preparing for war, we are preparing for peace. But for peace, you need power, you need strength, and you need to demonstrate that strength. We inherited a Soviet-equipped and Soviet doctrine army from the past People's Republican times. And now we are in a process of rearming our entire defense force, Army, Air Force, and all the other branches, and that to a NATO-compatible, modern 21st century equipment as such. And we're also taking important structural changes because we want a very professional army that is well equipped with the 21st century technology, mainly of professional soldiers, and at the same time, in a territorial concept, a very bold and active and numerous volunteer system. So these are the most important elements in the program.
What's the biggest national security concern right now? What keeps you up at night?
Well, there is enough to keep me up at night. In the past 2 years, changes have occurred that we have never calculated with or not expected to see a dreadful 20th century style war in our direct neighborhood on the east, or we have tremendous pressure from illegal migration in the south, or we just enough to look at what happens in the Middle East, and God only knows what's going to happen next. We maintain that the 360 degrees attention that NATO also takes as an important factor in their thinking. It is very important for us. So any danger can now, in these terrible times, occur from any direction.
Are you satisfied with the readiness of the Hungarian armed forces?
I ordered the armed forces last summer to increase readiness, which they have completed. Then we've done a few important personnel and structural changes. And to prove the concept, we introduced or did a very big exercise, as big as something never happened in the past 30 years in Hungary, a combined big exercise called Adaptive Hussars, where our friends from Turkey also contributed. Thanks for that. And that proved that the initial command of increasing readiness of the army worked, and now we have moved from a completely peacetime post-COVID defense force to a more active, more vigilant, more ready defense force.
Hungary, a NATO member, and Turkey, a NATO member. Very recent meeting between Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. 16 agreements signed during that visit. One of those agreements you were holding up, and with you was the president of the Turkish defense industry, Haluk Güngör. How are defense ties with Turkey, and what are the details of that cooperation between Hungary and Turkey?
It's actually 3 agreements that we signed on that recent visit, which was historic, and it was very, very heartwarming, and we were very honored to have the president in Hungary, and the whole of the government has prepared for it, and not only my territory, but other areas have also signed documents. Our intergovernmental and intermilitary ties are close and strong. On the military side, Hungary, since the war, has put up an enhanced vigilance activity battle group, which is a battalion-strong force on our eastern border, which contributes to the defense of NATO on its eastern flank. And Turkey contributes to that, which is great. As I said, Turkey also sent troops to our Adaptive Hussar 2023 large exercise, as we do to Turkey. So we send troops when Turkey needs them to exercises. Turkey has taken over K4, which is the largest land operation of NATO in the Western Balkans. Western Balkans are strategically important for Hungary, and we contribute that contingent with an important Hungarian force. And I could go on with the military relations, so they are strong and close. but also on the defense industrial side. Hungary, as I said, we are building up now a new and rearmed 21st century modern, in times and in parts, digital army. And for that we need good and strong suppliers, but not only suppliers, but also defense industry bases. So what we signed with the chairman of the foundation and also with the Minister of Industrial Development were two understandings for such cooperations, defense industry cooperations. And we also signed another agreement in which Neuromachina is going to produce cars in Hungary, which we now use in our military, 4x4s, and we have a wonderful name for it, Gidrán. Gidrán was an old war horse in Hungary. We are the nation who invented the Hussars, and the Hussars has been using the Gidrán, which is a very, very good and sturdy horse. And now we call this excellent 4x4 vehicle also Gidrán. So those Gidráns will be produced now in Hungary. So that's a very tangible and important cooperation between the two countries.
In previous interviews I was watching, preparing for this interview, I heard you talk a lot about how important drones are and drone technology is for the future of warfare, and this is something that Hungary is very interested in. Have you sat down and talked with the Turks about a possible drone acquisition or possible joint manufacturing in the future?
Well, drone is the young and upcoming technology everywhere in the world, not only the battlefield, but in the Ukrainian-Russian war, we do see that the drones are both surveillance and also striking drones are terribly important. Loitering ammunition, all the way up to the male-hail type drones, and inevitably we look around and we talk to our friends to Turkey, but also to other suppliers and makers, and to our own defense industry, which are the possibilities for us to incorporate that very, very important element on the battlefield. So yes, we have met several suppliers from Turkey, and the discussions are going on.
I want to talk a little about NATO also. How do you see the future of NATO as a defense minister who's at these meetings, talking with his colleagues? What's the future trajectory of the transatlantic alliance?
But first of all, what we could see now in this past 1.5, 2 years of war is that NATO works. This is very important because a few years ago, big heads of states in Europe have said that NATO was brain dead or something, and very few countries made the real financial contribution, and NATO was a bit lingering around for what is the real purpose of that. Now we can see in this terrible conflict that NATO is a real and strong border, and no one dares to touch the borders of NATO. This is very reassuring for a NATO member. We count with NATO's defense guarantees, and we also contribute very much, not only with the 2% that we have reached this year, which is the required level of defense spending within our budget, but also in missions and also in various other fields of military planning and force offering. So I'm very positive on NATO's outcome and outlook. I think NATO is strong and bold, and the reinforcement with other nations are also come well these times.
Also about NATO enlargement. Now, Hungary, along with Turkey, is the last two countries that are holding out on ratifying Sweden's NATO bid. What are Hungary's concerns regarding Sweden? And also there's been talk about Ukraine being added to the transatlantic family. What's your view on that?
Well, the Hungarian government supported Sweden and also Finland's joining the alliance right away. And we passed it already last summer to Parliament for decision making. So from the profession angle, we are of course very supportive for both nations since Finland is in. And also Sweden would be an addition from a professional point of view. I am not a parliamentarian myself, but I see my colleagues and friends in Parliament that they have political problems with that. And I understand their political problems, but it is up to them to make that decision, which I'm sure they at some point will make.
The war in Ukraine changed a lot of things, especially for Europe. It brought the specter of war on its hinterland once again. And when we look at Hungary's position versus the greater European position or the Brussels position, Prime Minister Orban has had a more proactive, peace-driven initiative. Where does Hungary and Europe differ on that viewpoint towards how to engage and approach this conflict?
Well, immediately from day one, we've been on the side of peace and peace talks and immediate ceasefire. And ever since, we are probably one of the very few countries that have decided not to supply lethal equipment because we fear escalation, because we think that the war should be stopped and can only be stopped if the fighters are not fighting anymore. And therefore, we are very, very bold on that. Now, if we see what is happening on the battlefield, we have to realize that there is no quick military solution to that dreadful conflict. And now more and more countries and governments and peoples realize that this is the case. So we have offered the European Union and also NATO that we should now rethink as the West, we should rethink our strategies towards that war, because the initial idea doesn't seem to work. So there needs to be another approach. So we continuously stand on the side of ceasefire and peace talks as soon as possible.
After the end of the Soviet Union and the fall of the Berlin Wall, there was this expectation that there's going to be an ushering of a global era of peace, but now we're seeing war in Ukraine, war in Gaza, tensions in the Balkans, tensions in Taiwan, a frozen conflict in Kashmir. Are we on the brink of World War III?
We are living the times of danger, I'm afraid. I'm afraid that in the past few years only, the security situation and the outlook has deteriorated so much that now everybody who is responsible to its people have to prepare. And this is our job in the Ministry of Defense and as a government to make sure that the Hungarian nation is well protected. As I said at the beginning, we stand firmly on the side of peace, but peace needs strength, and we need to be sure that whatever comes in these very difficult and turbulent times, which are very, very difficult to predict what the various spillouts and escalations could be, that we stand firmly and we protect this nation.